All right, so usually there is no way to track high-level speed to lead within your high-level account natively on the dashboard, but I'm going to show you a way to do that. Usually, if you want to do this, you have to basically do it manually. You write down when a lead is created, when your sales rep calls them first. But in this video, I'm going to show you how to make it fully automated without having to do any manual data entry. Here's the breakdown of what we're going to do, and we're going to start by using the Go High Level API. Okay, the API is extremely powerful, and it's going to give us all the data that we actually need to calculate speed to lead, touch rate, and basically anything else you could hope for. Then what we need to do is catch those critical events. So we're going to use the API, and then that API is going to send us webhooks that we can catch and we can store to our database or spreadsheet. Now I know I'm planning on having the title of this video be, basically track speed to lead without a spreadsheet, but the truth is you need a spreadsheet. You need some place to put your data, and even if you use like a Postgres database or an Airtable database, it still kind of looks like a sheet, right? But the point is we write the data from high level and then we can access it and display it in the way that we need to calculate, speed to lead or touch rate. And then the last thing we need is data visualization. So we can use something like, just a database, like Airtable has a built-in interface, or Google Sheets, has charts and graphs. Or I'm going to show you how to create this widget right here so you can just put it on your high-level dashboard. So let's get started. Okay, so the first part of this is actually creating our high-level app. So if you head to marketplace.gohighlevel.com, you'll probably have to create an account unless you already know exactly everything I'm about to do in this video and you've already, done this. But I'm not going to go through creating the app and setting it up and installing it, which is kind of a pain, just because I already have a video on that. You can search it on my channel or whatever. It's not rocket science, it's basic OAuth, so it shouldn't be too hard. But here's the thing that we need. So we're going to create this app, and then once we have our app, we select how we want it to be installed. So we can do agency and sub account. So you can install it at your agency level and then have all sub accounts have access to this app, or you can do a single sub account. Depends on how you're using high level. And then the important thing is if we go down to advanced settings and webhooks, what we want to do is we want to set up a URL to send our webhooks to, okay? So in this case, this is actually an old Supabase function that I'm sending it to, but we could have it be a make webhook or actually a Go High Level webhook, N8N, Zapier, or your own custom webhook. It really doesn't matter. I'll show you my webhook receiver just so you know kind of what it might look like, but this really isn't that hard, okay? So we just set up a place to send our webhooks. And the important thing is, in this case, this app is storing a lot of different data. This is just a demo app. But what we could do is, and what we really want, is we want two things. First, we need contact create, okay? Because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be saying to calculate speed to lead, when was this contact created? And then when's the first message or phone call that counts as being a touch, okay? So if that's a touch, then we want to calculate the speed to lead for the time from that contact being created to the first touch, right? So we need to know when the contact was created, and because of that, we need to store the contacts. We actually need to have these contacts be stored in our own database because, yes, you can query contacts using the Go High Level API. That requires that you maintain an access token, which I'm not going to cover in this video because you won't need it if you handle this contact create event. And I forgot what else I was going to say, but just turn on this event. And then the important ones are we have inbound message. This kind of depends if you want to count inbound messages as a touch. Personally, I don't, but they're good to have there anyways. And then the other part is outbound message. So for any outbound or inbound message, this includes phone calls. You're going to get a webhook to this URL. And in this case, you can set a custom one. So if you're using Make or N8N or something, you probably want to have a custom URL. But this is your default URL. And I'll show you what my event receiver looks like just so you can get an idea of what yours might look like. Okay, so this is our webhook handler. Yes, this version is in code. I'm sorry about that. I don't use Zapier or Make or N8N because I hate them. They're extremely a pain in the ass. But for you, they should be adequate. I'm just going to show you basically what you need to do. It's not rocket science. If you have someone on your team who knows computers, put them on this, get them working. Sorry if you're the person who just got sent to this video. I don't mean to be disrespectful. But here's how it's going to work. So we have a couple other things you probably don't need. IsDuplicate is a function using Redis just to check if we have a duplicate event. High level does tend to sometimes send duplicate events, so if you don't want to, get charged $1 million for Zapier or whatever, you can check if they're duplicate events. That's out of scope for this video. And then we have rate limiting. That's also out of scope. Here's the real thing. So what we're doing is, in this case, we have a try-catch method. Okay, so I just need to find where that actually happens. So what we're doing is we're trying to handle this event, because what could happen is high level has rate limits. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to try to handle this event, get the data about the phone call or the message, and then save it to our database. And if we hit any rate limits along the way, we need to fail this event, but still try it back a few hours later, just to make sure we actually get that data. Because you want speed to lead to be accurate, right? That's the whole point of automating it, especially, manually doing it is not only slow, it's also inaccurate, right? So we want it to be fast and also accurate, because what's the point if it's inaccurate, right? So we have this try, honestly, this might be overkill, but basically I'll just show you the nuts, the soup to nuts of this actual system. So what we have is our contact events, okay? So for a contact creation event, this is what we're doing. So we're going to get a webhook payload from high level that includes contact. It's going to be like contact create or contact update or whatever. And I'll just show you a demo. This is what the type should look like. So it'll be contact update, create, delete. It'll only be create if you just turned on that type of webhook. And then we have a location ID, a first name, phone, and we get some nice information about this contact. What we really care about is this value right here, which is the date added. Okay, so basically all we need to do, and we're doing a lot more in this app because I want to be able to show you like who was this contact, what's their speed to lead specifically. But if you just wanted to basically set up what I'm talking about in this video, all we would do is we would go into this function, and in this case, we're getting contact data to get like extra data. You can ignore this. All I'll show you is this. We're inserting into our database that contacts created at value right here, okay? And I should have zoomed in so you could see this easier. But we're just going to insert when this contact was created to our database. The other thing you want to make sure to store is the contact ID, and if you have multiple locations, the location ID, okay? Because you want speed to lead per location, and you also want to know for each contact, because the contact ID is the thing that's going to allow us to link messages back to that contact, okay? So hopefully that makes sense. We're going to store the contact ID, location ID, and the created at date to our database, all right? And this is going to look differently depending on how you're doing this. So you might have a make workflow that just updates, a Google Sheet row. And actually, I'll show you, we could do. If you have a single location, okay, this is not going to work if you're an agency. Because an agency needs to have a single webhook receiver that's going to handle everything. Actually, I take it back. If you want to do it in high level, that is possible, all right? So let's call this webhook receiver. And what this is going to look like is it's going to look like, let's say, so we're going to do inbound webhook, and this is going to give us a URL. So we could put this URL in this box, okay? And then whenever high level sends an event, we're going to be able to catch that event in our event receiver. You would probably want to set it up so that inbound messages and outbound messages have the same receiver, and then contact creations have a different receiver, just because the types are going to be different. But after you do that, I'm not actually going to save this. What you would have is basically, if you just want to save it to Google Sheets, which is a good place to start. Google Sheets, it's mostly free. Airtable is very expensive. Postgres is more complicated to set up. If you just want to get it working and test it out, I would do Google Sheets, okay? And what we can do is we can say, look up spreadsheet row, and I don't know if I can actually, yeah, we'll just do this one. So we can look up where, let's say this was contact ID, we can look up for the contact ID and then create a new row if it doesn't exist. This will handle like duplicate values. And then we're just gonna update, yeah, whatever, dude. I don't know, you get the idea. We're gonna update, we're gonna add this contact to the row. And that way, this is gonna cost you 2 cents every webhook, right? So every contact that's created, because it's a premium workflow trigger and then this premium workflow action, which might actually be comparable to Zapier. Zapier does charge an arm and a leg. So either way, this could work. This is basically all I'm showing you in this workflow is how that would work. Because we just want to save created at, location ID, and contact ID to some sort of database. Then in another table or another database, we're going to handle messages. So let me find this. So you can see we have the message webhook payload, and this is actually the same for inbound and outbound messages. Personally, I would have preferred if they broken it up by phone call and message and email, but you know, you get what you get. So this is the type, and it's like interfaces. It's kind of a complicated type here, but in general, we have the type and we have the direction, so inbound or outbound, and then we have message type, which is dictated as a string here, but it might be custom if you're using like a custom provider, or SMS, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, or call for a phone call. Then we have the status, and the important thing here is location ID and contact ID, and then date added, all right? And actually, the other thing we definitely want to track is user ID, okay? Because one thing that you don't think about when you're thinking about speed to lead is which messages do we actually want to track, all right? With phone calls, we do get a type like this, okay? So let me see if I have this actually typed out. Yeah, so we have this call duration value. So this call duration could tell us the phone call duration. So if let's say we have like a contact that got created, an hour later we try to call them, but the call doesn't go through, right? It's like 0 seconds or the call fails. Do you want to count that as speed to lead? That's a question for you to figure out. So if you want to only count phone calls that are over 30 seconds or over 60 seconds, you could do that, but it's really up to you. And so in this case, we need to figure out what is the actual, what is, like, is there a user ID? Do we want to make sure that any messages sent have a user ID, meaning they were sent manually, right? So if everyone, when a new lead is created, everyone sends out an automated text, right? Do you want to have that count as your speed to lead? That's a question you have to answer. And in my case, it has to have a user ID. If they're responding using the Instagram app, then it shows as outbound. So there's no user ID, but it shows the source's app. So you could also do that, where you use, if it's Instagram, then the source can be app and have that count as speed to lead. But again, this is all up to you. And so you need to look at these types and figure out, how do you want to count speed to lead? At any rate, what you would do is you would basically have the same workflow. Let's say we duplicated this workflow. And this one would be, the last one would be contacts. This one would be messages. Again, I'm not actually building this just because it's a huge pain. I'm going to show you how it works though. And then what we'd do is the same action. So we would go Google Sheets. We would have that webhook obviously trigger this workflow. And we would just say create spreadsheet row. And, of course, again, we can like find this random spreadsheet. And we would have to create a new sheet for messages. And we would just, create one. And these are the values that are important to save. Again, we want direction. So maybe we only want outbound messages. Then we want the message type, Facebook, Instagram, phone call, etc. And then contact ID and location ID. Again, these allow us to link back to that contact or location through a foreign key in your table. Google Sheets can do that. And then that'll allow you to accurately calculate your speed to lead per contact. And that means we're not calculating the speed to lead on the fly. So what you could do is you could say, when a webhook is received, update this contact's custom value with their speed to lead. That's not very helpful because the data is still locked up in high level and you can't display it natively. So we need to have it in an external database, and it's easier just to store the messages, and then we can aggregate them however we want, right? To calculate touch rate based on different criteria. I would suggest saving user ID, source, contact ID, and location ID. And also message ID is going to be good to have, just because for a message, you want to make sure, it's actually that you have like a primary key basically for that message, so you're not creating duplicate messages for every contact. If high level were to send duplicate events. That's my point. So anyways, that is basically how you would set up the webhook receiver, and then we would have those in our table. I'll show you what the table needs to look like. Okay, so this is what our table looks like. So this would be an Airtable or Postgres or Supabase or whatever database you want to use, or Google Sheets obviously. And this is what your messages table should look like. So you should have a message ID, a location ID, a contact ID, and then an optional user ID. So again, this only happens when we actually have a manual message, right? And then a message type, a direction, a source. So this could be like app, API, workflow, whatever. And then I just store the status just because I want to know if the call, in this case, this text failed, or if it was undelivered, or whatever the status is. I might want to factor that into my calculations in the future. So I'm just going to store that, right? And then this is what our contacts table look like. And I just realized you definitely want to make sure you're also storing date added. This is an ISO timestamp. So this is time zone agnostic. It's really nice. You definitely want to store the date added to your whatever database that you're using as well, because this is going to allow you to calculate speed to lead. But now you see that we have in our contacts table, we're going to have contact ID, location ID, and the date they were created. And so this is really easy now, because all we have to do is, if this contact had a message, we could just say, okay, they were created, back in August of 2024. And so, or what is that, July of 2024. And let's just, basically calculate the difference between the first message and when they were created. That is the database layer. And that's really all you need. You just need to store this data. And then that's all there is to it. And so finally, the last step, oh my God, my voice is wearing out. I'm really on my last legs here, is to display this data, okay? And I'm gonna leave this up to you partially. I'm gonna show you how I'm doing it in the dashboard. But this is really up to your personal preference. So with this data, you can calculate things like touch rate or engagement rate, what percent of the leads are responding, or, speed to lead, like by different category, whatever you want. And so all you have to do is basically, in Google Sheets, you could display this pretty easily, or Looker Studio, or in my case, what I'm doing is I'm creating a custom dashboard. So in order to get that number, our speed to lead and our touch rate, to show up on this dashboard, here's how it works. So first of all, what we're doing is, if I click on this widget, this is literally just an embedded URL. So this is just a website, actually. And if I go to this website, we're going to see exactly what we're seeing on that dashboard widget. All right, it's just much larger. And so this is literally the most powerful thing. So if you create a website or like a public dashboard that you can view, then you can embed this into your high level account, and you can just make it really small so that it fits in one of these cards. And then the only thing you have to do is actually create this website. Now, that might be more complicated depending on your approach. Of course, you could probably use Lovable or Bolt.new or something like that to do it. In my case, I'm using, my text editor is Cursor, but here's how it works. So this is literally just a web page, like I said. We have an indicator component, which shows us the difference between this value and the previous value. So we can see, you could also compare this to like a KPI, which would be also really nice. So here's your speed to lead, and then it's down 20% from the last time, and our touch rate is up 13%, which is a good thing as well. So in this case, all we're doing is just displaying, the header, like the actual value with an indicator, and then, some text here. This is really basic, and you'll notice we don't have any data fetching here, okay? But all you would have to do is, to get that data, you would go const data equals await drizzle.select, and then we would do created at, the contact created at, and then we would go message created at, and actually we'd go first message created at and contact created at, and we could go db.xcontacts.created at. This is throwing a ton of errors because this is not the right way to do it, but I hope you you get the idea. Date added, and then this is going to be X messages. Okay, and so we're going to select the first message, and what we need to do is a left join on X, or actually we're going to do .from contacts left join on on our messages, where the contact ID is equal to the message's contact ID. So now you see why we need to have that contact ID stored here, so that we can actually figure out, okay, what is the contact ID, right? Or what's the right message to tie back to? Then we can also filter where db.xcontacts.locationID, and we could put in the location ID that we're viewing from, so we can just pass that basically in the URL for our dashboard, which, by the way, if you didn't know, we could do something like this, where we go location.id, and this will dynamically fill with our actual location ID for the location we're viewing right now. So we can very easily basically figure out what's the, where are we viewing this, this data, and then return the correct value, right? So all we would do is this, and then we would need some sort of calculation to const average speed, speed to lead, and we would basically just find the difference between those two dates for all contacts, and then take the average of that. And the touch rate is going to be the, it's going to be basically where percent of contacts with a man with an outbound message. And of course, you might want to add more filters to this. That would be like direction is outbound or source is app and user ID is not null. So obviously, like I said, this is going to look a lot different in a lot of different, scenarios for using this. But the point of this video, I just wanted to show you how powerful the API is and that you can literally do this in an afternoon. Like, it's not rocket science. It's not that hard to set up. And once you do it, I mean, you'll just find out there's so much other stuff you can solve, which I'll make more videos about other stuff that you can do with the API. But yeah, feel free to comment below if you have any questions about how to set this up, or I don't do any custom consulting, but if you want to ask me questions, I'm open to that. I like meeting people. So if you want to book a call and ask me questions, I guess that's fine. So anyways, yeah, thanks for watching. Hit subscribe. If you want more billion-dollar advice like you just received, I mean, you're going to be a millionaire after this, clearly, because this is the main bottleneck. Then I don't know. I don't want to overstep, but you might be an idiot if you don't subscribe. So anyways, all right, I'll see you in the next video.